I didn't understand sending me back. Why? Why would anyone leave a place like this? There is a message you must deliver. He continued, his voice steady but heavy. With sorrow, a message for the world. And then I saw him, Andrew Tate.
Imagine dying, leaving this world, and standing in the presence of Jesus, only to be sent back with a message so urgent, so world-changing that it could alter humanity's future. This is the true story of Barbara Johnson, a 63-year-old woman who defied death, returned to life, and brought back a warning for us all. What she saw and who it involves will leave you speechless. Watch until the end to hear the message that could shape the fate of our world.
I never thought I'd be sitting here at the age of 63, recounting not one, not two, but 3 times I crossed the veil between life and death. Yet here I am, alive again with a message I can't ignore. The first time it happened, I thought it was some fluke, a miracle meant just for me. But by the 3rd time, it became clear this wasn't about me at all. It was a message meant for everyone. The last thing I remember before the first crossing was the sound of my daughter's voice. Susan's hands gripped mine, so tightly I could feel her trembling, even as my own strength faded. "Mom, please don't leave us," she whispered, her voice breaking, tears streaming down her face. I wanted to respond, to tell her it was okay, but my body felt heavier with every breath. The beeping from the heart monitor beside me slowed to an eerie rhythm, and the air in the room thickened with desperation. My grandsons were there too. Ethan, the older one, paced back and forth at the foot of the bed, his sneakers squeaking against the cold hospital tiles. His muttering was barely audible, but I caught bits of it. "This isn't fair. She's not ready." Caleb, always the quieter one, stood by the window, his back turned to me, shoulders shaking. I knew he couldn't bear to see his grandma like this. I could feel their pain, their love, so raw, so real. But something else was pulling at me. It was bigger than the room, bigger than their voices or their sorrow. I felt it, unmistakable, like the gentle tug of a tide calling me out to sea. The room around me began to fade. The beeping of the machine slowed further, until it stopped altogether. Susan's desperate voice broke through one last time. "I love you, Mom." And then silence, not the heavy silence of grief or despair, but a peace so vast and still, it enveloped me completely. My body let go, and with it, so did all the pain, the fear, the weight of years. It was over. The moment I let go, I felt weightless. My body, frail and weak just moments before, was gone, replaced by a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in decades. The aches, the sickness, the burden of time, they dissolved like morning mist under the warmth of a rising sun. I thought it would be darkness, an endless sleep. Instead, there was light. At first, it was just a flicker, distant and soft, like the first star in an evening sky. But it grew, brighter and brighter, until it was all I could see. This wasn't the harsh glare of a hospital lamp or the cold brightness of a winter morning. This light was alive. It wrapped around me, warm and gentle, like it knew me, like it loved me. I wasn't afraid. In fact, I'd never felt such peace. The struggles of life, the heartbreak, the worries, all of it seemed so small now, like shadows melting in the presence of something far greater. I began to move, not with my legs, but with my whole being, drawn toward the light by an invisible force that felt as natural as breathing. I didn't fight it. I couldn't. I didn't want to. As I got closer, the light transformed. It wasn't just light anymore. It was a place. Colors appeared, vivid and pure, unlike anything I'd ever seen on Earth. Rolling hills, golden fields, rivers that sparkled like liquid crystal. The air itself seemed to hum, not with sound, but with a music I could feel deep in my soul. Everything here was alive. The trees, the grass, the very air. It wasn't just a place. It was a symphony, and I was part of it. And then I felt him, Before I even saw him, I knew he was there. His presence was unmistakable, like the warmth of the sun after a cold night. Only deeper, it filled every corner of this place, every part of me, with a love so profound it brought me to my knees. When I finally saw him, I couldn't speak. Jesus didn't look like the paintings or the statues I'd seen in church. He was radiant, glowing with a light that seemed to come from within. His eyes, oh, his eyes. They saw everything, every joy, every sorrow, every secret I had ever buried. And yet, there was no judgment, only love, pure, unending love. When he spoke, it wasn't with words. His voice was everywhere, in me, around me, filling the very air. "Barbara," he said, and just hearing my name in his voice was enough to undo me. It wasn't just a sound. It was an embrace, a promise, a truth so profound I could barely stand it. "You are here for a moment," he said, "but your work is not done. I am sending you back." Before I could question him, before I could ask why, the light began to change. And just as quickly as I had entered this place, I felt myself being pulled away, back to the world I had thought I'd left behind. When the light enveloping me shifted, I felt myself standing, not with a body, but with a presence in a space beyond comprehension. Jesus stood before me, radiant and unshakable, his love and authority filling everything around us. His eyes, full of understanding and compassion, locked with mine, and I knew whatever he was about to say would change me forever. "Barbara," he began, and again, hearing my name in his voice felt like the softest embrace. "You are here for a moment, but your work is not done." My first instinct was confusion. Work? What work could someone like me possibly have left to do? I had lived a modest life, raised my children, and loved my family. What more could be required of me? "You have been chosen to deliver a message," he continued, his tone steady yet tinged with sorrow. "Humanity stands at a crossroads. The choices made in this time will shape not just this generation, but generations to come." I felt the weight of his words press against me, a gravity I couldn't deny. "What crossroads?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What do you mean?" He looked at me with a mix of tenderness and urgency. "There are forces at work, Barbara, forces of light and forces of darkness. The future of humanity hangs in the balance. The decisions of a few will ripple through the many, shaping a path toward either unity and harmony or division and despair." My mind raced, trying to grasp the enormity of what he was saying. He wasn't speaking in metaphors or abstract ideas. This was real. The world was being shaped right now by the choices of leaders, innovators, and influencers, and those choices had consequences beyond what anyone could see. "There are key figures," Jesus said, his tone sharpening. "Men and women whose actions will guide humanity's steps. Their hearts and their intentions will determine whether humanity rises toward the light or falls into the shadows." I wanted to ask more, to understand the specifics, the details, but before I could speak, he raised his hand gently, and the space around us began to shift. "You must see," he said, his voice soft yet firm. "To understand the weight of your message, you must see." The air around me shimmered, and the radiant light of Jesus' presence gave way to a cascade of images. It was as though the fabric of time and space had been pulled apart, revealing not just what was, but what could be. The first vision filled me with awe. I saw Earth, beautiful and vibrant, spinning in the vastness of space. It teemed with life, a symphony of humanity and nature working together. Cities glowed with clean energy, their architecture blending seamlessly with the environment. Rivers ran clear, forests thrived, and people moved with purpose and joy. Technology was everywhere, but it wasn't dominating. It was serving. Machines worked alongside humans to heal the planet, advance knowledge, and connect people across the globe. I could feel the harmony in this world, a sense of unity rooted in wisdom, morality, and compassion. But then the vision shifted. The light dimmed, and shadows crept in, swallowing the beauty. I saw another Earth, cold and fractured. Skyscrapers loomed over desolate streets, their lights flickering like dying stars. The rivers were poisoned, the air thick with smog. People walked with heads bowed, their faces empty, their lives dictated by machines that no longer served but controlled. Technology, once a tool for good, had become a master, stripping humanity of its soul. The contrast was stark, one world filled with life, the other devoid of it. But the most chilling part was the realization that both futures were possible, and the tipping point wasn't far away. Humanity wasn't on a steady path. It was teetering, and the balance could shift at any moment. As I struggled to process what I was seeing, Jesus' voice came again, steady and unyielding. These are the paths before humanity. One of light, where wisdom and morality guide progress, and one of darkness, where greed, fear, and corruption drive humanity into despair. I turned to him, desperate for answers. What determines which path we take? The hearts of those who lead, he replied. There are those who wield great influence, whose choices will ripple through humanity. Their intentions will shape the future. I saw faces then, figures standing at the center of these two paths. Some were familiar, others were not. Innovators, politicians, spiritual leaders, influencers. They all stood at crossroads of their own, their decisions pushing humanity closer to one future or the other. Some will choose light, Jesus said, his voice filled with hope. They will act with humility and love, using their gifts to elevate others. But others will be tempted by darkness, their gifts twisted by pride and greed. The weight of the vision settled on me like a heavy cloak. This wasn't just a warning, it was a call to action. The future wasn't set. It could still be shaped, but only if humanity acted with intention and faith. You must deliver this message, Barbara, Jesus said, his gaze piercing yet kind. Tell them what you have seen. Tell them to choose wisely, for the future depends on it. And with that, the visions began to fade, leaving me with the overwhelming realization that the world I had left behind was now my responsibility to change. As the visions continued, they began to narrow, focusing on individuals who held immense influence over the hearts and minds of millions. One figure emerged from the haze with startling clarity: Andrew Tate. His image was so vivid it felt like he was standing right in front of me. I could see the intensity in his eyes, the confidence in his posture, and the unmistakable aura of charisma that surrounded him. Why him? I asked, my voice trembling with confusion. What is it about this man? Jesus' voice came, calm yet weighted with meaning. Andrew Tate is a man of great influence, Barbara. His words carry far, and his actions ripple across the world. He is both a leader and a symbol. I saw flashes of Tate's followers, young men from every corner of the world, hanging onto his every word, reshaping their lives according to his philosophy. I could feel their admiration for him, their desperation to find purpose, to be guided. Many were inspired by his message of self-discipline, resilience, and ambition. But intertwined with this inspiration was something darker, a current of materialism, arrogance, and misplaced power. He speaks to the lost, Jesus explained, to those seeking strength in a world that has left them behind. His words have the power to uplift, but they also have the power to harm. As the vision unfolded, I saw the duality of Tate's influence. On one side, men found strength in his teachings, reclaiming their confidence and striving for self-betterment. They worked hard, broke free from mediocrity, and pursued excellence. On the other side, others used his words to justify dominance, selfishness, and cruelty. The line between empowerment and toxicity was razor thin, and Tate's influence walked it precariously. He is a man who stands at a crossroads, Jesus said. He has the power to guide many toward the light, but he is also vulnerable to the shadows that seek to consume him. The vision shifted again, and I saw the vast reach of Tate's influence, the videos, interviews, and social media posts that traveled the globe. I saw the arguments, the debates, and the fervent loyalty of his supporters. His every move amplified, his every word dissected. The enormity of his platform was undeniable. Pray for him, Jesus said softly, for the choices he makes will not only shape his soul, but the souls of countless others. The vision grew sharper, focusing on Andrew Tate standing in a space that seemed infinite and boundless. Around him, two distinct paths stretched out, each representing a possible future. On one path, there was light, a world where his influence became a force for good, inspiring men to build lives rooted in discipline, compassion, and purpose. On this path, he used his platform to promote growth, unity, and respect. His followers thrived, not just materially, but spiritually, finding strength in service to others and in the betterment of their communities. I could see him in this version of the future, a leader who empowered, who uplifted, who used his gifts to guide humanity toward a brighter, more harmonious world. But then the vision shifted to the other path. Darkness loomed here, and Tate's influence twisted into something corrosive. His teachings fostered division and dominance, a world where material wealth and power became the ultimate goals. I saw men hardened by greed, relationships broken by selfishness, and a culture driven by arrogance and disregard for others. The same charisma that could inspire greatness became a tool for destruction, feeding shadows instead of dispelling them. Jesus' voice echoed, cutting through the vision. His gifts are not inherently good or evil. Like all tools, they reflect the intentions of the one who wields them. Andrew Tate's choices will determine the path he leads others down. The vision shifted again, and I saw Tate standing alone, his expression torn between confidence and doubt. Around him, shadowy figures whispered, some encouraging him to embrace humility and wisdom, others urging him toward pride and selfish ambition. It was a battle for his soul, one that mirrored the battle for the souls of those who followed him. He is at a crossroads, Barbara, Jesus said, his tone heavy with urgency. And the world watches. The decisions he makes will ripple outward, shaping not just his destiny, but the destiny of those who look to him for guidance. I felt the weight of these words. This wasn't just about one man. It was about the countless lives tethered to his influence. His choices would echo far beyond himself, steering a generation toward light or darkness. Pray for him, Jesus repeated. Pray that he finds the wisdom to choose the path of light, for in doing so, he can bring others with him. But if he succumbs to the shadows, the consequences will be great. As the vision faded, I was left with a profound sense of urgency. Andrew Tate wasn't just a man. He was a symbol of the choices we all face, choices that could either build a future of hope or one of despair. The vision sharpened, and I saw the ripple effect of Andrew Tate's choices, spreading across the globe like waves on a vast ocean. Jesus stood beside me, his presence steady and reassuring, yet his gaze carried a deep sorrow that I couldn't ignore. Barbara, he said, his voice firm yet compassionate, look closely. What you see here are not just the consequences of a man's actions. They are the battles being waged for the souls of many. The world around us shifted, and I saw individuals, countless faces blurred by motion, yet distinct in their struggle. Some were young men, looking lost, their eyes reflecting a deep yearning for purpose. Others were older, hardened by life, their hearts scarred by disappointment and anger. All of them seemed to gravitate toward Tate's voice, a voice amplified by technology, filling their ears with promises of strength, independence, and power. For some, his words were like a beacon. I saw young men straighten their backs, take charge of their lives, and cast aside their apathy. They worked harder, treated their families with respect, and sought to build better futures. Their faces glowed with newfound confidence, their lives transformed by a message that inspired them to rise above their struggles. But then the vision darkened. I saw others who twisted Tate's words into justification for their worst impulses. Anger replaced confidence. Arrogance overtook humility, and they lashed out at the world around them. Relationships crumbled under the weight of ego, and a toxic hunger for dominance consumed their lives. In their pursuit of self-worth, they lost their compassion, their humanity. Jesus gestured toward this division. Do you see, Barbara? His platform is a tool capable of lifting souls to the light or plunging them into the shadows. It is not the words themselves, but the hearts of those who hear them that determine the outcome. The weight of his words struck me. This was bigger than Andrew Tate alone. He was a focal point in a much larger battle, one between forces of light and darkness, fought not with swords, but with choices and values. I saw a young man standing at a crossroads, torn between two voices in his mind. One urged him to rise with humility, to use his strength to serve and uplift others. The other whispered of domination and self-importance, urging him to take without giving back. His face contorted with indecision, a battle raging within his soul. Jesus' voice softened, filled with sorrow. For every soul that chooses light, another may fall to the shadows. This is the battle, Barbara. It is fought in every heart, every day. And leaders like Andrew Tate have the power to tilt the scale. As the vision faded, I realized the enormity of what I'd witnessed. The battle for souls wasn't a distant, abstract idea. It was happening now, in the hearts of millions, shaped by the influence of a man at a pivotal moment in his journey. As the images faded, I found myself once again standing in the presence of Jesus. The weight of what I had seen was overwhelming. My heart ached with the realization that so many lives were caught in the balance, influenced by the choices of a single man. Jesus turned to me, his gaze filled with both sorrow and hope. Barbara, he began, you must deliver this message. The time is short, and the battle is urgent. I felt the responsibility settle heavily on my shoulders. What can I do? I asked, my voice trembling. I'm just one person. How can I change anything? Jesus' expression softened, and his voice was gentle but resolute. The power of one voice, guided by love and truth, can reach far more than you imagine. You must tell them to pray. Barbara, pray for Andrew Tate, for all leaders, and for humanity as a whole. Pray for him, I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't help but think of the division and controversy surrounding Tate's name. Yes, Jesus replied, because he is at a crossroads, as are so many who follow him. Prayer is not a passive act. It is an act of faith, a call to divine intervention, and prayer must be paired with action. The air around us shimmered, and I saw glimpses of what that action could look like. Communities rising together in faith, holding their leaders accountable for their words and deeds. Families teaching their children the values of compassion, wisdom, and humility. Individuals refusing to be swayed by greed, arrogance, or fear. You must remind them, Jesus continued, that their leaders are a reflection of their own hearts. If humanity chooses to foster greed and pride, their leaders will follow. But if they nurture faith, wisdom, and compassion, those virtues will guide their steps. The enormity of his words struck me again. This wasn't just about praying for one man. It was about a collective awakening, a reminder that the future wasn't in the hands of a few, but in the hearts of many. Tell them to act, Jesus said, his tone firm, to speak out against injustice, to encourage what is good, and to reject what leads to division. The tools of this age are powerful, but they must be wielded with wisdom. Technology, influence, leadership all of it can build or destroy, depending on the hearts of those who use them. He placed his hand on my shoulder, and a profound warmth filled me. Go back, Barbara. Share what you have seen. Tell them to pray for Andrew Tate, for their leaders, and for one another. For the battle for souls is not yet lost. There is still time to turn toward the light. As his words echoed in my heart, the light around us began to fade, and I felt myself being pulled back to the world I had left behind, carrying a message that could not wait. The first thing I felt was air rushing into my lungs, sharp and sudden, like I had been underwater for hours, and was finally breaking the surface. My chest heaved, and I gasped, the sound cutting through the stillness of the hospital room. The beeping of machines returned, frantic and erratic, a stark contrast to the peaceful silence I had just left behind. Then I heard it, Susan scream. It wasn't the cry of grief I had imagined would follow my passing, but a scream of sheer disbelief. Mom. Oh my God. Mom, she shouted, stumbling backward, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Her face was frozen in shock, her hand covering her mouth, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Ethan, mid-step in his pacing, froze in place, his eyes wide and his jaw slack. No way, he muttered, almost inaudibly, his hand gripping the edge of the bed for support. Caleb turned from the window, his face pale as a sheet. The room was chaos, their reactions blending with the sounds of nurses rushing in, shouting orders, fumbling with machines that moments before had declared me dead. Dr. Reynolds burst into the room, his face a mix of shock and confusion. He darted to my side, his eyes flicking between the monitors and my face, like he couldn't trust what he was seeing. This isn't possible, he muttered under his breath, shining a light into my eyes and pressing his fingers to my wrist to feel for a pulse. I turned my head to look at Susan, her tear-streaked face now inches from mine. Her hands were trembling as she reached out to touch my arm, as if afraid I might disappear again. Mom, you were gone, she whispered, her voice cracking. We said goodbye. How are you here? I opened my mouth to speak, but the weight of what I had experienced bore down on me. How could I even begin to explain? The message, the visions, the weight of humanity's future. All of it swirled in my mind. My throat was dry and my voice was raspy, but I managed to whisper. I was sent back. The nurses were adjusting the machines now, their voices blending into a hum of confusion. Dr. Reynolds looked as though he wanted to speak, but he held back, his medical training wrestling with what he had just witnessed. Susan's hand tightened on mine. Sent back? She asked, her voice trembling. What do you mean? I looked at her, and in her eyes, I saw the same urgency I felt. There's something I need to tell you, I said, my voice steadier now. It's not just about me. It's about all of us. The days after my return were a blur of questions, tests, and disbelief. The doctors wanted answers, explanations for what had happened, but none of their machines or scans could measure the enormity of what I had experienced. I wasn't focused on their questions, though. My mind was consumed with the message I had been sent back to deliver. I began with my family. One evening, as we sat around the living room in stunned silence, I told them everything about the light, the peace, and the visions. I described the two futures for humanity, the crossroads we stood at, and the role that figures like Andrew Tate played in shaping the path ahead. Susan listened intently, her eyes filled with a mix of awe and skepticism. Ethan leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly, while Caleb sat back, his face unreadable. When I mentioned Andrew Tate, their reactions shifted. Andrew Tate? Ethan asked, his brow furrowing. The guy all over the internet? What does he have to do with this? I explained how his influence was a symbol of the choices humanity faced, how his platform could either uplift and guide or harm and divide. He's at a crossroads, I said, my voice steady, just like the rest of us. The choices he makes and the way we respond to them will shape the future. We need to pray for him, for all leaders, and for ourselves. This isn't just about one man. It's about the world we want to create. Caleb finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. So, what do we do? Pray, I said. Pray for wisdom, for compassion, for the strength to choose light over darkness, and act. Hold people accountable for their choices, including yourselves. Build a future based on love, connection, and faith. I began sharing my story more widely, first with friends and neighbors, then with church groups, and eventually through online videos. Some people were moved, others skeptical, but I could see the seeds being planted. Conversations started, minds opened, and prayers lifted for the future. As I spoke, I always returned to the urgency of the message. The future isn't set. It's not too late to choose the path of light, but we must act now. Pray for those in power. Pray for leaders like Andrew Tate, that they may use their influence for good. But above all, reflect on your own choices. Each of us has a role to play in shaping what comes next. I ended every message the same way, my voice steady with conviction. The time to act is now. The battle for souls is not yet lost, but the path we take depends on us. Choose wisely, for the future is in your hands. And as I looked into the eyes of those listening, I could only hope that the urgency I felt in that heavenly light would ignite something in them. 2. Want to hear more of this? Then click on the video on the right-hand side, which is even crazier.